G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. I'm back. It may not feel like I went anywhere because I uploaded a series of videos while I was away, but I've been in Greece for like 12 days. Got back literally this morning, got up at 4. This game happened while I flew, but I've just watched it back and we're here to talk about it. So again, apologies for not uploading a Adelaide Crows review. I copped a couple of silly comments, again suggesting that I only review the games where we win. And I just want to say that I know that it's unreasonable for me to expect that everyone watches every single video to the end, but I feel like I did mention that I was going away, and I did also blatantly say I can't talk about the Adelaide game in particular because I was trailing and I was on a Kentucky. So I just want to put that to bed. Like, if anyone thinks that I'm just here to review the games where we do well, I mean, you just have to go back, look at the last 18 months. Anyway. I'm falling into the trap. I just want to say that was the reason I didn't review the game. I just have not watched it, and I have no interest in watching it. I was in Santorini during the Adelaide game, and I was just surrounded by a bunch of non-Australians, and they were like, "Oh, how's your football team doing?" And I was just like, "Don't ask." The score just kept going up by 12, 18 points to Adelaide. But anyway, we're here to talk about St Kilda. And, I got to say, I felt fairly negative about this game. I changed my tips to St Kilda at the last minute. And I wondered if that was just me being grumpy, a bit of post-holiday blues. I had a great time in Greece. On my way back, I missed my connecting flight, so I had to stay in a hotel in Copenhagen last night. Sleep deprived, just in a pissy mood, and I saw the team changes, wasn't particularly happy with selection of this game, and I was like, is it just me? Am I in a negative funk? And then I look on Big Footy, and a lot of Eagles fans were feeling the same, and I think this is also a product of, A, frustration with selection. I think that's justified. We can talk a little bit about that, but also B, it also has signalled the return of some expectation with this football team. It's also a fact that we lost by 99 points last week against the Crows in what can only be described as a dire performance. Again, I haven't watched the game, but I'm not going to defend that. I was relatively positive after the Collingwood loss because the effort level was there, and without having to watch the Adelaide game, I know that the effort level was not there. Do we put this down to fatigue? Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's mental fatigue. It's very common to have a good win as a young side and then fall away. Like, I've seen that with Eagles sides over the last 20 years. I'm not trying to excuse it. It was obviously a shit performance and an unfortunate return to last year. By contrast, this result was, better. I mean, we only lost by 14 points to the Saints, but there's a negative funk about this game. I'm not going to lie. I feel shitty about the fact that we lost. Is that rational? It somewhat, yes. But the fact that I'm probably more gutted about this than I was about the Collingwood game is probably just a byproduct of expectation. We smashed the Demons, and suddenly we have this expectation again to win games at home. The Saints haven't been going so well this year, and it's a byproduct of that expectation. In some ways, it is a privilege to have some expectation again, but the prevailing feeling at the moment is that most of us would be pretty unhappy with how that game went. So, prior to the game, one frustrating element is that, since the injury list was updated on Tuesday, we had 3 key players ruled out of this game. Jaden Hunt, for the second time, a surprise omission due to injury. Tim Kelly was laid out with a hip flexor. Jake Waterman hurt his shoulder. We're hoping the latter two are just 1 weekers. I'm not too sure about Jaden Hunt, but those are 3 pretty important players. And I would make the argument, maybe we do win that game if all 3 of those players play. That was the reason I changed my tip, and we didn't win. But anyway, we conceded 5 of the last 6 goals in this game. Absolutely run out of legs, no doubt about it. It's probably worth mentioning that the Saints, I think, Simo said in his press conferences, is one of the best teams in terms of work rate across a whole game in terms of GPS numbers. And that makes sense. They play a pretty defensive pressure style. It hasn't been working for them, but that is probably, some context as to how they ran out this game better. And we do look fatigued. We look stagnant in this game, but, nonetheless, we stuck in it. I mean, how positive is that? It's better than not staying in the game. Absolutely no doubt. The lead changed 9 times. Again, I don't know how much of an excuse this is. I'm not trying to say it as an excuse, but maybe one way of explaining the fluctuations in us right now are probably, the mental fatigue of a big win and then failing to back that up and some travel. I mean, mature teams do get fatigued as well. It felt like the case in this game. It felt like the Saints came to play and just outworked us a little bit for longer. That was it. We weren't bested massively. A lot of the numbers, we were just edged, pretty much across the board in every stat, clearances, inside 50s. Unfortunately, we were less efficient inside 50 than them as well. Oscar Allen and Waterman out doesn't help that, but that is also kind of annoying because St Kilda are one of the worst forward line efficient teams in the competition. Anyway, so let's just talk about, maybe should I start with negatives and then go through some positives? Okay, we'll talk about selection. So again, I think a lot of the negative thoughts about this game were we fielded a 22 that, had about 5 or 6 youngsters in it, or at least that's the way it felt. And of course, the late change with Jack Williams coming in for Waterman dips that even further. Tim Kelly missed. For context though, Jack Williams does come into the side, tips the balance towards youth a little bit better than it was, but Jack Williams only had 2 possessions for this game, so that's probably worth mentioning. I had a look. We still had 9 players under 50 games versus St Kilda's 5, and we just still have a very top-heavy and bottom-heavy best 22, even if the average age kind of met in the middle. We were kind of similarly experienced to St Kilda, with Gaff and Sheed in the side. I think that was where a lot of people were frustrated. But we still did have 9 players under 50 games, which shows, it didn't feel like we have the best 22 profile and the youth balance of a team that is rebuilding. There's no doubt about that, but it is still bottom heavy. There are still a bunch of players in there that are developing. Then you look at who might have played instead of, say, a Gaff or Sheed or whatever. I mean, the 3 that come to mind are probably Dewar and Johnston. Both have had a taste. Yeah, it would have been nice to see them both in. But for the record, I thought Gaff and Sheed played okay. And while I was frustrated at the time, don't get me wrong, the fact that, Kelly and Hunt and Waterman all missed this game kind of does add a little bit of justification for some of the senior players being picked. Jack Hutchinson was another one that possibly could have played instead of Petricelli. Petricelli didn't have a pretty good game, I don't think. I think he had 8 touches coming back from injury. However, looking at the past, what we've done with mid-season selections is generally not played them in the very first game of AFL. I think we've given them at least a week. So we'll see what happens next week. If there was any other questions about selection, we probably did go into tall. I think we had 9 talls in this game. Matthew Flynn comes in for his first game at AFL level for about a year, if I'm not mistaken. So he's obviously had that hamstring injury for the first half of this year. And then I think at GWS, he played in the first half of the year and then got dropped. So we're talking about 12 months, roughly, I think, without playing an AFL game. I haven't double-checked that. But either way, I felt like he started strongly and fell away. But overall, when you look at how static our ball movement was, the lack of run comparatively to St Kilda, this probably is a point of selection that we can possibly criticise for sure. Again, moving through some negatives. Again, I talked about the 3 mystery injuries that have popped up since the injury list got announced. That's really annoying. In terms of numbers from this game, just the 44 inside 50s, not great. It's not diabolical, but it's still lower than what we'd like. 44 inside 50s, without knowing for sure, generally won't win you games of AFL footy. And we got close, but it wasn't quite good. Another negative, before I get to the positives, I do have some positives from this game. Over-reliance on Harley Reid, man, he was fantastic in the second quarter, 13 touches in that term, and then 3 touches after halftime. I actually thought he might be injured, but turns out he was just tagged by Windhager. So I'd say exposing an over-reliance on Reid. I think this isn't really a learning though. We already knew that we are over-reliant on some of our very best players. It's pleasing that one of them is 18 or 19, recently turned. But, we're a top-heavy team where some of our best stars are playing well, like Yo and obviously McGovern, Barras. I thought Barras was really good in this game. Waterman's having an incredible year. And then the bottom 6 to 7 to 10 sometimes performances are not quite scratching that surface. But we already kind of knew that. So when Harley Reid's playing well and he gets tagged out of the game, we're going to get exposed. Again, I'm pretty pragmatic about where we are. That kind of makes sense. We haven't developed the weapons around him, and if Tim Kelly misses, it just gets a little bit harder for him. The Reid suspension is another thing I'll highlight here. He's almost certainly going to get suspended. Simo seemed to think there was nothing in it. I'm not hugely into the tribunal process. I don't really have strong opinions. I can't, because the rule's always changing. It's a moving target. I just wait until the tribunal thing. It's just a bit of a blind spot for me. Having said that, looking at it, it just looks like a textbook suspension. So hopefully it's not too bad. But the negative thing, other than the fact that we're going to miss him for 1, maybe 2, I don't know, is that I didn't really know that you're ineligible for the Rising Star if you get suspended. And I have to say, I feel like that's got to change. I've never really commented on it because A, I didn't really know. B, it doesn't really come up. But I think in the modern game, where suspensions are so prevalent and where there's so many opportunities for players to get suspended, we see it so often. I think it's really harsh, and you could probably extend this to the Brownlow as well, to make a player ineligible when you consider a lot of suspensions these days can just be incidental. Intent does not actually matter that much. Harley Reid's one was probably careless, but I'm just talking in general. When the Brownlow, for instance, is considered a best and fairest for the league, right? I understand the logic behind that. You got to be the fairest as well, and therefore not get suspended. But I'm pretty sure, I'm going to take a punt and say whenever that was established as a principle, was probably back in the day day when you could clothesline someone and not get rubbed out. Anyway, I just think that's unfortunate. It's not a big deal. The rules are the rules. The game's the game. Whatever. One other nitpicking thing before I go through some positives here is just the reluctance to play certain players in the midfield. And this isn't even so much a criticism of today, but I think it's been a case of over the last 3 years where we've underexposed some players and not playing them in their proper role. So one example is Zane True, and I don't have any centre bounce attendances here, but this guy is clearly just an on-baller. So for him to come in and play on a half-forward flank, I mean, last year I understand why we did it to some extent when we had like no forwards last year. Like there were periods where we just had like Gaff and Luke Edwards picked in the forward pocket because we just needed to fill out a team. But, Zane True playing forward today, I think he had at least one centre bounce. He won a clearance. I think back to guys like Connor West and Xavier O'Neill, more so O'Neill. I think O'Neill did have some AFL traits, but the amount of times he was just playing on a half-forward flank did not give him the opportunity to prove himself. And I do wonder if Zane True, even though it's a small sample size, he's only played like a quarter this whole season, given the best opportunity to prove himself. I understand the conservatism late in the game when the game's close and you want to get your best players in the midfield, but I don't know. I think this has been a trend of over 3 or 4 years where players have been picked, lesser lights, your Foleys, your O'Neills, your Trues, I guess, in previous years, Connor West, Izzy Winder. Some of these guys are probably just midfielders that are being plonked in other positions, and I don't think it's ideal for them. So hopefully True, just if he keeps a spot on the side, which he may or may not with Reid out, I hope he gets the opportunity in his desired role, for sure. All right, positives. Again, it's a negative stank over this game, but there was definitely some positives. Tom Barrass, fantastic. I thought Harry Edwards played a role today as well. And another player who I just think is better off staying in the side. I think we need to develop our key backs, and I think Harry Edwards is at the point where he needs to be in the AFL side to develop. I think he's spent enough time in the waffle. He's physically mature now. Thought he did a decent job. Rotherham out with this illness. Actually, that's a 4th player that missed after the injury list was released. That's solid. Harley Reid's first half, again, talked about that already. But 20 disposals, 7 tackles, 7 clearances is still a good game. 7 tackles, fantastic for a player that is offensively minded and a player you want the ball in the hands of. He lays his tackles as well, wins 7 clearances, and he did that, impacting the game for 50% of it. Jinby, I think, continues to grow. I'm really pleased with the way he's gone. He had 20 disposals. Again, his output and production has probably been the thing that hasn't come yet. To get 20 is a nice little threshold for him. But he also had 8 tackles, 6 clearances, and his intercept marking as well is something I like that he's added to his game. Like, he's pretty good at intercepting the ball through that midfield transition as well, which I like. I think he's getting better and better. Slow and steady with Jinby. He's been good. Again, Flynn was solid. I do think this creates an awkward situation here with Bailey Williams, where I think Bailey Williams' A game is at the centre bounce. So while he becomes acclimatised to being a forward, I think he's going to be a bit of a fish out of water. Now, should we be patient and expect Bailey Williams to get better over time playing in a new role? Probably. We probably should. But for the time being, I don't know if this is our best forward mix. I also don't want to see Bailey Williams out of the side. So it does create this interesting situation here with Bailey Williams. But like I said, Flynn was solid and faded as you'd expect. I thought the forwards in Ryan and Cripps were good. Cripps kicked 3 goals. Liam Ryan kicked 2, I think, with a goal assist to Cripps there. And yeah, I'm glad that we have stuck fat with Ryan, and I've been a little bit miffed, I suppose, if that's the right word, at people writing off Liam Ryan. He just needed some time back into the side, and he's getting there. Yo was workmanlike without being outstanding, but if this is his, 5 out of 10 game or whatever it was, he still had 27 touches, 8 clearances, and 7 tackles. He did his job. I thought Gaff was okay. I think we need to factor in, you compare Gaff to similar players in similar roles. Chesser, Luke Edwards, these guys who have played on a wing, and 21 touches and a goal and 400 metres gained stacks up pretty well against what other these guys were producing. Now, I do understand the decision to keep Gaff in the side when we're supposed to be rebuilding. I do understand that. But I will say that I thought it was really nice when he kicked his goal and there was a real celebration. And while I do want the best for this team long term and selecting the right guys, at the end of the day, Gaff is, a West Coast Eagle that was loyal to us, didn't leave after the flag when everyone expected him to. He's worked hard to get back into the side. I will say, just as aside from the football element of it, it was nice to see that. It was nice to see us get around him And, who knows what will happen next week. I'll talk about selection in the preview for the North game. I noticed Simo was very complimentary of Dom Sheed, and the reason being is because he tagged Jack Steele, and he had more touches than him. Steele had 17 touches. I think Sheed had 20 by the end of the game. So if that's a little niche now for Dom Sheed to line up on the opposition midfielder, then fair enough. Maybe he can find his niche there. And it does mean that he has been relegated in the pecking order. So there is an awareness of Dom Sheed at the moment. And if he keeps getting these roles, I know that he was horrific against Adelaide. I can't really comment on that too much because I didn't see it. But, against Melbourne, I think it was against Clayton Oliver, he played well. Now Jack Steele, maybe this is Dom Sheed's avenue to providing value to this football team. And again, we can criticise selection all we want, but I thought those guys were solid. And I guess one last positive is that this loss doesn't really cost us anything. It's frustrating, no doubt. I'm frustrated. It wasn't an entertaining game. Our expectations have risen, maybe wrongly. I really feel like this side is... I've said it before, and I don't know how much people... this resonates with people, but it reminds me of 2009 where... in our best games, we would just randomly pump teams. I don't have it in front of me, but I feel like we just torched Port Adelaide by 50 points in round 4 of 2009 or something. And then we'll just go back to being an absolute cellar dweller team and then, good again. And ultimately, we were still in the middle of the rebuild. I think what it comes down to is our best players firing. And when they're not firing and the support's not there, we drop off. But anyway, what I was meaning to say is that, we're still a rebuilding team. Even if the age profile of this game didn't really suggest it, it may be, I don't want to make this too glowingly positive, but maybe at the end of the year, we might look back on this and be like, probably better we didn't win that. Now we have pick 3 instead of pick 5. Who knows? That's all to play out. I really don't want to lose to North next week. I think it's possible. More so because I think North will win a game soon, but we'll see. But yeah, whether we keep that pick, whether we trade it and do what we did in 2022 with Sheasel and, turning that into Jinby and Hewitt, it's too early to speculate on that. But either way, it's better if that pick is pick 3 and not pick 6. It gives us a bit of bargaining power. So if we didn't play horrifically, and we still retain a really good draft pick, then, maybe that's a net positive at the end of the year. Anyway, guys, it's good to be back. Again, I wish this game had gone better, but it is still good to be back. I'm in my happy place. Like I said, I got off the flight a few hours ago. I'm a bit tired, a little bit grumpy. But I will be back. I am going to Croatia again, but you will get an Eagles North Melbourne preview this week, even if it's a little bit earlier in the week. And I think I will be back to review the game as well. So as far as True Eagle is concerned, not too much interruption there. Then if I'm not mistaken, we have a bye next week. I'll be back full-time. I'm not traveling anymore after that. And I'm thinking in the bye week, I do some more review content, looking back at the 13 rounds we've seen so far, mid-season review. That should be good. But for now, I'll say goodbye. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the game, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.